I think we take for granted having the modern sports options we do. It took outside pressure from the President of the United States to legalize the forward pass in football, and basketball games from the pre-shot clock era would put anyone to sleep. The polished sports we see today were not always so great. They evolved from older traditions, some of which were surprisingly sophisticated and occasionally brutal. Today we're looking at 5 bizarre and exciting sports that were once all the rage, but time has mostly forgotten. The first stop on our tour takes us to ancient China, more than 2,000 years ago. Cuju was a game that many experts believe to be the earliest form of soccer. The term Cuju translates literally to kickball. References to Cuju appear in texts dating back to the Han Dynasty, enjoyed not just by soldiers and commoners, but by the noble class as well. Cuju was typically played with a leather ball stuffed with feathers, hair, or other lightweight materials. Early versions involved just keeping the ball in the air, much like a modern hacky sack session. As the game evolved, goals were introduced, and the objective became more structured. Players would attempt to kick the ball through a defined opening or over a certain marker without letting it touch the ground. It was used as a military training exercise to keep soldiers agile and coordinated. Members of the royal family sometimes hosted lavish Cuju tournaments. Eventually, interest in Cuju declined and newer pastimes took over. By the time China opened up more to the west in the 19th and 20th centuries, formal soccer, imported from Europe, had taken center stage, overshadowing its ancient forerunner. Modern revivals of Cuju do exist, but primarily as a cultural demonstration rather than mainstream sport. Our second sport is often called the Mesoamerican ball game, with regional variants including Pokta-Pok and Ulama. This is one of the oldest team sports in history, dating back more than 3,000 years. If you've ever visited archaeological sites in Mexico or Central America, you might have seen the massive stone ball courts, elongated rectangles flanked by sloping walls, often decorated with elaborate carvings of mythological scenes and former players. In a typical version of this game, players use their hips, thighs, or forearms, depending on the regional variant, to bounce a heavy rubber ball around the court. Some versions included small stone hoops placed high on the walls, and getting the ball through one of these hoops was an incredibly difficult feat. There are many records of players suffering serious injuries from the impact of the ball. In some cases, protective gear like thick belts or padding around the hips was used. The game still demanded a great deal of stamina and fearlessness, and certain matches were integral to ritual ceremonies. In extreme lore, and possibly in some real scenarios, the losers, or winners depending on the specific culture and time period, could be sacrificed. With the arrival of the Spanish in the 16th century, Mesoamerican cultures were dramatically disrupted. The ball game was viewed by conquerors as more of a spiritual practice than recreational, and thus was often suppressed. Some versions continued to exist in the shadows and evolved into regional folk traditions. Even now, you can find communities in parts of Mexico that maintain a version of Ulama, albeit in a much reduced cultural context. The Roman Empire was home to a game called harpastum, derived from the Greek word harpazine, meaning to snatch. Harpastum was a chaotic and highly competitive sport. Mentioned in various ancient texts, it was practiced by soldiers and the youth throughout the empire. Most agree that the objective involved keeping possession of a small, hard ball within your team for as long as possible. Teams of varying sizes would attempt to pass the ball around using short kicks, tosses, or handoffs, all while fending off the opposing team's efforts to steal it. Physical contact was common, and the level of roughness probably depended on who was playing and in what context. In the military camp, it could be far more brutal compared to a leisurely game among Roman aristocrats. Harpastum wasn't just confined to Rome or Italy. As Roman legions marched across Europe, they brought their sports and cultural practices along. Over time, these locally adapted versions might have laid the groundwork for medieval forms of football and rugby, which evolved independently in various European communities. Like many aspects of Roman life, harpastum faded as the empire fractured in the 5th century. Without the unifying structure of imperial rule, organized sports across Europe diversified into many local, less formal games. Faint echoes of Harpastam may live on in sports like Calcio Storico in Florence. We sail north to medieval Iceland, where the Vikings had their own ballgame called Knattleikur. The name translates roughly to ballgame in Old Norse, and it's mentioned in several Icelandic sagas. These sagas indicate that Knattleikur was more than just a diversion. It was a community spectacle, drawing spectators from nearby farms and settlements. The rules remain somewhat mysterious, as no standardized rulebook has survived. From the sagas, however, we can deduce that players, often split into two teams, battled around a hard ball using sticks or perhaps their bare hands. Matches could get rowdy. The sagas often recount fights, injuries, and feuds sparked by the game, suggesting it was as much a test of bravery and warrior spirit as athletic prowess. In Viking society, physical strength, courage, and skill in combat were highly prized virtues. Knattleikur likely offered an opportunity for young men to build and display these traits outside of battle. People would gather in open fields, especially in the relatively mild summers of Iceland, to watch these contests unfold. The game had such significance that it sometimes played a role in legal disputes or community gatherings. As Christianity spread throughout the Norse world, certain pagan traditions, including contact sports, began to lose their official status or be discouraged by religious leaders. Societies in Scandinavia transformed, adopting new laws, customs, and leisure activities. By the later medieval period, the older Viking practices, such as this, had all but vanished, surviving only in references within the Icelandic sagas. Our final stop brings us back to China, this time during the Song dynasty, about 1,000 years after the early periods of Kuju, with a game called Chuiwan. The name translates to strike ball, and many historians have drawn parallels between Chuiwan and modern golf, noting both the use of clubs and the objective of sinking a ball into a hole. Chuiwan flourished among the upper classes, especially during the Song and Yuan dynasties. Aristocrats would set up elaborately designed courses in gardens or on specially prepared grounds, complete with obstacles or various target holes. Manuals and guides to Chuiwan strategy existed, suggesting the game had developed a level of sophistication akin to golf instruction books today. Using clubs made of bamboo or wood, some with metal fittings, players attempted to strike a small ball towards a hole or target within the fewest strokes possible. The game combined skill and strategy, although it lacked some elements of modern golf like standardized courses or a uniform scoring system. One of the most debated topics among sports historians is whether European travelers or merchants who visited or traded with China might have brought back the concept of Chuiwan, influencing the development of golf in Scotland centuries later. As Chinese society evolved, fashions and entertainment shifted. New forms of theater, storytelling, and leisure activities emerged. By the time Western sports started to gain popularity in China, Chuiwan had already receded into the background. What can we learn from sports that have faded away? For one, they show us that the human love for play, competition, and community transcends time and geography. They also remind us that some sports we take for granted today have roots that date back thousands of years. It's hard to imagine any of the modern Big Three American sports fade into obscurity with the size of modern leagues. But even these behemoths face constant rule changes and modern touches.